Well, hello everyone. This is Tamara Childs and Ruth McCants for your weekly energy update on September 15th, 2017. Hey, Ruth.
Well, hi, you have me over here giggling on a very earthy Virgo day.
Yes, we just had a very Virgo and Leo we just had a moment where we were being silly over language. So that was fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, how's everybody doing in YouTube land? We are here to talk about the week, here to talk about the energy. I just want everyone to know that it's about 32 degrees out. Well, maybe 40 degrees today, but it's rainy and cold. We're having a change in the weather today. So I'm excited for the fires going out.
Well, I really am happy for you over there. And when it cools over on your side of the mountain, it cools our side too. And so we are down about 74.5, which is a great thing.
Well, I think, and you and I were not joking, but actually it would be really wonderful if we could just move the excess water from one part of the earth over to the place where
That's right.
where things are too parched. And, I just feel like since everything is connected and everything, we are of nature, our consciousness does affect the world in so many different ways. And this is so much a time where we're trying to find balance, isn't it?
That's really interesting. You should say that, Tamara, because it's not an easy concept to understand that our consciousness can affect the weather, what it does, because everything is really one. When I used to teach in my psychology class, and we talked about all of the peoples of the world, because I don't use the concept race. There can only be one, and that's human.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to show a picture that was taken by the satellite of Earth. And many people have seen this picture of Earth. And I would ask the question, who is getting off? Is there anybody who can make the decision right now? If you're different from that person and you're different from that person, can you all of a sudden say, okay, open the door and I'm getting off the planet because I want to go live someplace else where those people are not populating that other planet?
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, I'm just putting it out there. Can we get off? No.
Yeah, because I think that a lot of us have the perspective, and we're doing this. Usually we do this on a Thursday. Today's a Friday. And so my radio show was this morning, and the topic was perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
It's interesting because there were a lot of comments today in the chat about that people in authority, people over them, were just, really pushing their weight around, and people were feeling kind of pushed around. And I really feel like that speaks quite well to some of the things we've been dealing with astrologically this week. We have the Mars-Mercury conjunction tomorrow coming up. And that when there are energies that are, let's just call them impersonal energies that we feel personally, that they kind of, they're like windstorms, or they're
right.
things in the energy system around us, and we're all affected by that energy. We make it personal. It becomes something that we feel irritation. We feel a feeling that feels like irritation, and then we create a story about it, or we say it's connected to this person. I'm irritated with them.
Well, I just did a workshop yesterday where I was dealing with what I'm calling archetypes,
Mm-hmm.
but I also equated archetypes as being subpersonalities.
Mm-hmm.
And as difficult as it may be, each one of us is carrying, whether we call it irritation of someone else,
Mm-hmm.
the real story has to be checked on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And you can call it one's own little character. You could give it a name. What little character inside of me may be irritated, and I'm looking out through my own eyes, and I see it being outpictured because I'm considering that other person to be the source. But the real truth is, each one of us is the source of whatever it is we are perceiving. And that's not an easy concept. That let me give you a little story that happened many, many years ago. I was at, I think it was an athletic event, a track meet, and someone stepped really close and practically on my toes. I mean, it's like they were cutting off my access. And I actually felt my own anger, that part of me, because we all, if we equate it with astrology, we all have a Mars energy. And if we use the astrological description, Mars has to do with taking action, but it's also that part of us that wants to go into fight. So in that moment, I could feel my energy rising up, like, wait a minute, person, you stepped right in front of me without saying a word, and I felt my own energy rise. I went on, and about maybe no more than 10 minutes later, this other person comes to me, and he says something really out of quite angry. And in that moment, I got it. I actually made the connection that we, at any given time, are experiencing our own thoughts, our bodies are giving us information in terms of feelings. And I put it together. I then recognized from that moment on, I said, I'm never going out of the house without doing something to center myself. Because if I take any amount of anger or frustration and I go out into the world not being centered as much as I can be, I may see it back in the form of somebody else. And I never forgot that. So I'm passing that on because this week is filled with a lot of fiery energy. We've got Leo sitting, we've got Leo, North Node. We have Leo, Venus. We still have Sagittarius sitting in Saturn. We got Uranus and Aries. So we all perhaps need to be very, very mindful during this week of all of that free-floating energy that can rise up in some very strange ways.
Yeah, I was describing that, there have been a couple of incidents this week with people I've talked with where there was sort of some impending violence or somebody was acting really irrational that they came across. So there's a hot-headedness that, again, there are a lot of people who haven't done their own work. They don't know, they haven't processed at all their own psyches, their own childhoods, their own stories of disappointment. They don't, they may feel a feeling and they'll just suddenly feel enraged. I had written a blog about this last week, but they're called the Distractors, and they are energy states that take us spinning out of our center. And
very wonderful blog.
Yeah, they're and it's really great to recognize them because there's a whole little collection of them. They're shame, guilt, anger, fury, doubt. And then there are also some other distractors that we don't think of as distractors, like love, money, business. So, and those are just things that have a lot of thought forms attached to them that cause us to be uncentered when we think. But really what energetically the distractors are doing is they're forming like a tornado in your system that's going through and collecting energy, and it's usually negative and it's not even yours. So I just, there are always going to be people who are overtaken by the distractors. So those are people who sometimes commit acts of violence because they don't have a filter.
And, I want to comment on what you said. I really do think it is our energy to the extent that we haven't consciously released those distractors. We haven't, because part of it has to do with actually taking ownership that I am feeling a bit angry today. You may not remember what the initial situation was, but I do think it's very, very important to claim and recognize. It's not saying you're bad or anything like that, but it does say that we need to own that. Going back to my story, in that moment, something clicked inside and I had to take ownership of my initial reaction to, because that's the only thing that each one of us has power over, is our own reaction. And the moment we can say, all right, I am feeling this way. Let me go sit in the park. Let me take a breath. Let me just sit here for a bit. And let me allow myself, let my body, because our bodies are holding this oftentimes, and let me breathe. Just let me breathe and I'll let it go.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the distractors are not like real emotions. So we do sometimes feel anger. Sometimes it's very fierce. But the difference between an actual emotion of ours and a distractors are more like artificial instigators of emotion. They steal energy from you. They're not. Okay. They're not exactly like something that really comes from us. But of course, yes, we do have to own our energy, own our emotions that we feel. And I know exactly what you mean when you told that story, that sometimes, and especially women, sometimes women, not all women, but in female culture, being angry is sort of like, oh, I'm not angry, I'm fine. And then, you go about and then somebody accosts you on the street and you think, why did that happen? And it has to do with that unmet, that expression, that feeling that you have inside, and somebody, like you said, is somebody else is acting it out for you.
Yes, very descriptive, acting it out. But in that moment, something clicked, and I was able to see the connection. That was the really important point that I'm making and sharing. That make your connections, and it's okay to make connections. In fact, it's very important to make the connections.
Mm-hmm. Let's go over the cards that we got, because I was just going to share from the radio. I had drawn a couple fire cards because you were mentioning we've had fire. And one of them is, I think I got this one last week. It's the King of Fire, King of Wands again, which has to do with owning where we want to direct our energy, like being leaders of our own energy. And I also got the Nine of Fire, which is, I feel that it's important for us to own our perspectives and to own where we're coming from, and to not, there is a lot of distraction energy, which we talk about almost every week. And so, there are people talking about this or that, and we have to own our strength. Where we're coming from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I almost look at it as like clouds. You can get embroiled and you can get involved if you choose in other people's stuff.
Yeah.
But you can also choose to look at it and say, I like the Buddhist thing when they say aso, and you just let it pass on.
Well, it's funny because there was something that I was in a circumstance this week, and that I alluded to this on the show as well, where there was some gossip, and it wasn't matching my own experience of the situation. And for a while I was sort of trying to puzzle over it and saying, I wonder, why this is being said. And finally, I just said, that's just not my truth. My truth is this. This is my experience, and I'm going to remain open.
Yes.
And if it turns out this other way, that's fine. But I'm not going to let this poison where I'm coming from this week. It's just not worth it to me.
And I'm really, that is so important what you said. I'm going to own my own truth because I stand in my own sovereign power. And I don't have to choose to take that in. And you're going to be where you are. And that brings, because we're going to have the new moon in Virgo. And so that grounding, it's really, because two months in a row, although the eclipse was a teeny tiny little bit of your heart's desire, because the new moon started in Leo, but it passed within an hour, it had gone into Virgo. So I'm saying that we had 2 months in Virgo, and that 2 months in Virgo is saying, pay attention, make decisions, and get rid of all that stuff that's not serving you well. And also stay grounded in your own stuff, just the way you said. Stay grounded in your own truth.
Yeah, very much. For our show, I drew 3 of Chuck Spezzano's cards. I think this is called the Love Pack. And I really like this deck. It's very sort of cartoonish in its art, but he comes from a perspective that's kind of A Course in Miracles, which is the idea that we're either operating from love or from fear. And so he has the trouble cards that you can pull, and these are cards that are alerting you to they're called problem cards, alerting you to something in your mind that is causing a potential problem for you. And then he has healing cards, which help you get back on the path of love. So what I drew for people is self-consciousness. I'll show you this card. Self-consciousness.
Okay, now hold your card. Now this is really, and we are really having to put these together. I have 3 cards, and I think the first one goes right along with that. I have Sonia Choquette's Ask Your Guides, and all 3 of these came upside down. The first one is compromise and a master teacher. So what was your self?
Mine is self-consciousness, and it's a problem card.
Okay, and I would say what's going on. If we have compromise, but it's an upside down card, what must we do to be one's own master teacher? Because I believe that within us, we have the master teacher. So what is it that needs to be examined? What may we be compromising? Self-consciousness and compromise.
Yeah, it's, I mean, what I get from this card is that when we're focused more on sort of a preoccupation with the ego self, we forget we're looking in the mirror too much. We're not looking out.
I like that.
And really enjoying, because the other 2 cards that I got are receiving.
Okay.
And trust.
Okay, I'm going to put my second one, and I think it goes right along with your receiving. What must we begin to own? I have denial, if I turn it, denial and divine helpers.
Oh, cool.
So receiving and giving are 2 sides of the coin. What is it that we're in denial about? Major question.
Well, that's an interesting, that's bringing up something, because I feel like there's, in the collective and with people that I've had contact with, there's just this place, and let's just say this is for everybody, all of us have a wall around not every issue, but there are a couple of issues where we just feel like, I just can't get beyond that. And I see other people getting beyond that, and it's not an issue for them. But for me, this is where, the buck stops here. That's our timer. And so, you know, I think sometimes what we're in denial of is our multi-consciousness and the ability that we have to actually go beyond the perceived
Yeah,
barriers. But we all
absolutely.
have learned to be limited
Right.
in one part of our life or another.
I'm glad, and that brings up when you said our multi-consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first, we're conscious, but then in the subconscious, we've got to go in there and see what programs, because you were saying the wall, and the wall won't let us get into the transcendent, the ability to receive in a whole different way. Because once we get into, quote unquote, what we call the collective unconscious or the transcendent or the universal, we can get information to help us move beyond those barriers.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, we won't allow ourselves to do that
Yeah.
because we see things only in one way. Those denial is about those little blinders that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think I always feel like the few days before the new moon are a very interesting time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's like the energy's kind of less. Sometimes I experience that I'm a little more tired, or I just don't, it's like I don't feel as inspired. But I think that is definitely part of the cycle. And I know by next week, with our next week's show, you know, we will have had that new moon in
Right.
Virgo, and it will feel like we're ready to create again.
Well, I actually like the dark. You see, the dark, because, and you absolutely spot on that when we're in that dark, it feels like, if you've ever been in a room where the lights are off and you're trying to feel for the light switch and you say, where is that darn thing? That's what it kind of feels like. You're absolutely right on it. That it feels like I'm never going to be me again, whoever me is.
Yeah, I think I just want to say to our viewers, just let the next few days be a time of letting go, when you don't have to necessarily, you know, build a monument, you know, before the new moon. You know, just
Right.
let the cycle work for you.
Right.
Let the out breath happen.
And today, with this last part of moon in Cancer, very good time to go and sit and put your feet up and just get quiet. And I will guarantee something you've been asking will just literally magically drift up from that depth
Mm.
if we allow it.
Mm-hmm.
My last card upside down, but it says balance
Oh, nice. Oh, that's,
with the divine, and that's I'm going to turn it this way though,
yeah.
because I think this is what we're trying to get at. We can achieve some amount of balance if we allow the divine teachers, you can call them whatever, the guides, you can call them your elves and your fairies if you'd like, but they're there, and we can begin to get some of that energy resolved, some of that quote unquote shadows resolved.
Yeah, I had written a blog this week on, you know, gardening secrets that create happiness in our lives, and one of them is that we don't have to do everything alone. So as
Right.
you say, um, you know, when you're feeling tired, or when you're feeling like um, things are just too much to, you know, you just need a break. Take a break. Take a
Right.
break and go with that cycle, and just know that when you're ready to create again, like maybe beginning next week,
Mm-hmm.
you'll have universal forces supporting that as
Absolutely.
well.
In fact, I would encourage all of us to call on the universe this in these days, for all of us collectively and personally, just to call on that energy, to ask to be guided and to be helped. You're so right, Tamara.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thank you, Ruth, and thank you, everybody, for watching. Leave your comments below, and be sure to like and share the video if you'd like to. And we will see you next week.
Absolutely.